What are the world's greatest solved mysteries? That it wasn't actually a zombie ghost that was haunting the amusement park. It was Old Man Wilkins, the crotchety Ferris wheel operator. He was using the park's old spotlights and wind machine to just make it look like it was haunted the whole time. And he would have gotten away with it too, if it weren't for those meddling kids. Jeepers. The source of the Nile. A legendary mystery if there ever was one. Livingston. Burton. I love those stories. I think it's pretty much pinned down now. Now that Top Gear has had their say. I'm too lazy to go look at a map. I think I learned this in geography class at one point or another. What is the source of the Nile? Lake Victoria. Source of the Nile. The jump from the miasma theory to modern germ theory was fairly incredible. Great minds of the 19th century essentially created modern medicine from scratch. Hell yeah. Semmelweis. I thought that Semmelweis empirically discovered that hand washing reduced hospital infection rates, but couldn't explain his findings, whereas, I think, Louis Pasteur subsequently isolated and identified bacteria whilst investigating spoilage in a brewery, leading him to postulate germ theory. They found the Titanic after decades of looking. It was in the Atlantic all along. That explanation is a bit simplistic. It turns out, it was at the bottom of the Atlantic. People had been sailing around the top of it for decades, but nobody saw it because it was on the bottom. The discovery and positive identification of Richard III's body under a Leicester car park is one of the most astonishing achievements of modern archaeology. The giant ball of fire in the sky seen by all humans known as the sun. It was only about 100 years ago, between 1904 and 1939, that people figured out what it was. A giant fusion reactor. We forget how strange it must have seemed. Stomach ulcers. They sued to be diagnosed as the result of stress and other lifestyle ailments until some Australian scientists discovered it was actually a bacteria. No one wanted to believe him. The pharma industry was making $billions from people taking their medicines every day for the rest of their lives, to the point Barry Marshall drummed a culture of bacteria to contract the disease and a cure of antibiotics to cure it. The medical world finally accepted his conclusion and they won the Nobel Prize in 2005. BBC Co UK. The Legend of Troy. What did happen? Until the 19th century, the story of Troy was thought to be myth along with the rest of the Odyssey and Iliad. Then some archaeologists discovered the ruins of the city. Here's wiki article if you are interested, wikipedia.org. The reason I remember is one of my teachers mentioned that it had been thought of as a myth. And I always wondered what other myths would end up being true too. Cheers. This is my favorite. The sailing stones. On flat desert floors, stones leave strange track in the ground as if they have moved somehow. Neat. Smooth. Drag marks that make them look as though they are sailing through the earth, sometimes changing direction. Wikipedia.org. Solution. With a small amount of water on the surface, a sheet of ice forms and traps the stones. Wind then moves it all, dragging stones along the muddy ground like styluses. Humans only bother going out there when it's dry, so all that remains is stones and their tracks. Edit. Link fixed to make it non-mobile. Also, it has been pointed out that this isn't 100% solved, but ice moves the stones pretty much covers it, even though the precise conditions that facilitate the groove in aren't entirely agreed upon. See below for further discussion, and upvote the fella who called me out on my lax use of solved. The mythical emperor from which China derives its name turned out to be very real when his tomb was discovered. Nobody believed the legends of his fantastic burial ground, complete with thousands of unique warrior statues standing guard. Edit. A user, PKW5, has pointed out that Qin Shi Huang as never mythical. The discovery of his tomb, however, was still one of the world's biggest breakthrough for historians. This may not be the greatest solved mystery ever, but I enjoy it. My friend's grandfather worked as a detective when he was younger. One day, he receives a case that was quite confusing at first. It was a foggy night. Around 1 AM. And two men were driving home going opposite directions. Their cars were found about 100 meters away from one another on the sides of the road they were driving on. Both men suffered traumatic head injuries and died as a result. What happened? It was a foggy night. Neither men could see very far in front of their cars due to this. So, they both stuck their heads out of their windows to see the road. And their heads collided as they passed each other. Surprised that no one has mentioned the Rosetta Stone. Wikipedia.org. Up until 1801 or so, ancient Egyptian was completely untranslatable. An Apollonic soldier found the Rosetta Stone, which had a message in ancient Egyptian and the same message in ancient Greek, which scholars at the time could translate, right below it. It proved the key to translating ancient Egyptian. As the article notes, it is also the most visited object in the British Museum. I have seen it, as an object in and of itself. It's not so impressive. But being in the presence of something which helped unlock such a gargantuan puzzle is breathtaking. Edit. So they couldn't actually translate ancient Egyptian right away, as I thought. But they figured it out eventually. Giant squid. Used to be a mythological creature. Now we have video. And specimens. A great benchmark for anyone who claims that $ mythological thing exists. Go get me a dead one. And record it while you're at it. I remember growing up in school always hearing about the great mystery of the Jamestown colony. Well, I guess the mystery is solved. Hint, for those of you who don't want to click the link. Cannibalism. Germ theory. Imagine attributing every illness known to man as the anger of your deity or due to bad odors. Truly a problem that stumped academics for centuries. On TV, not sure which show, I once watched, they explained the Bermuda Triangle mystery is a big gas bubble that comes from under the ocean. Cthulhu who farted. Anastasia's body was found a little more than a mile away from the rest of the final Russian royal family. She died at the same time as the rest of them. She did not escape. And all the women that claimed to be her were liars. In the mid-1800s, high maternal mortality rates for mothers giving birth at hospitals resulted in Vienna hospital tasking Hungarian physician Ignaz Semmelweis with finding out why. Semmelweis realized it was due to cross-contamination and urged doctors to start washing their hands. At the time, there was such critical backlash from the medical community that Semmelweis slipped into depression and died from what appeared to be dementia. Edit, typos. Probably mapping the human genome. Seems like that wouldn't be easy to do to when starting out. And is certainly a helpful mystery to solve. Probably also how to use quantum entanglement to do secure networking. That's a pretty big one. Also the deep field map on the visible universe is a pretty good one. And I guess finding out about subatomics like quarks and bosons and stuff is pretty good too. All excellent mysteries and all have been solved at this point. The idea of spontaneous creation. Oh man. This was such a moment. When we used to think that flies were created from nothing in the middle of meat and just flew out. Then Pasteur did his stuff with the broth and the curvy flask. Such a boss. Indisputably smacking the itch of ignorance. How the Great Pyramid in Egypt was built. While there hasn't been outright conclusive proof yet, look up the theory of French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin for some really solid detective work. I think it's been adequately demonstrated to be the result of casting, which pretty much makes perfect sense. Not sure why the theory isn't better known since it's very likely accurate. Back in the day, an IRA Kriller leaves an apple with a bite mark near spent shell casings at the scene of murder. It's the only clue. Desperate for a lead, police send the apple hundreds of miles away to a dentist. In Harley Street, I think. Who says the bite belongs to a particular type of person? The dentist describes the man so accurately a police artist is able to draw a mugshot. The image is circulated. And a desk sergeant, who pinned the shot on the board at a station nearer the scene of the murder, sees the eventual convicted murderer walk through the station door. Not a week after the mugshot is posted. Under caution for an unrelated minor offense. The sergeant couldn't believe his eyes. Such was the accuracy of the dentist's description, which included not only the mugshot, but the man's height and build. Freewebs.com. The mayor dare her apparently had a bite that meant his top teeth anchored into the apple, allowing his bottom teeth to plow the bite upward, contrary to how most of us take the first bite. The mystery of how Jimmy Savile managed to look and act like a six-pest without actually being a six-pest. This was solved when it was discovered that Jimmy Savile was a six-pest. Who'd have thunk it? Exactly where did the Titanic sink? Took like 76 years to find it. The technology used to find it wasn't even invented till the 40s. Until then all they could do is drop a magnet somewhere in the ocean and hope for the best. Evolution. Or rather the diversity of life, to which the solution is evolution. The origin of humanity. Every culture had their story, but the truth turned out to be far stranger and more interesting than anyone imagined. Impressively, Darwin solved this one without even knowing what DNA is. Still gotta figure out that origin of life on Earth though. Exogenesis? Abiogenesis? There was an experiment done in regards to this many years ago. Simulated the atmosphere before oxygen was around. Added a bunch of electric shocks, simulated lightning, and watched for results. The results were very handy. Not really somewhere where I can easily find them, sorry. But it's pretty damned interesting. The falling soldier. What really frustrates me the most is that it never mattered if it was staged or not. It only mattered to those filthy apologists of Franco who cared, and they used it to distract from what really mattered. Franco being a filthy dictator. The Mary Celeste. When was this solved? What happened? It's generally believed the evaporating alcohol from the barrels of beer they were carrying looked like smoke, which the crew mistook for a fire and evacuated. The disappearance of the Australian Prime Minister Harold Holt. He went swimming at a beach in December 1967 and didn't come back, and neither could his bodyguards find him. And lol. No official federal government inquiry was conducted, on the grounds that it would have been a waste of time and money. I'm going to have to go with the discovery of gravity. A simple act of an apple landing on Newton's head which led him to come up with explanations for the orbiting of moons and planets fascinates me. Not to mention he discovered the calculus used to explain these discoveries. Edit. Grammar.